Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's December 5th. Today, we celebrate a wealthy vineyardist who came up with the idea for a raisin co op, and the willow expert raised in beautiful gardens. We'll learn about the botanist who was murdered thanks to miscommunication and the oldest tree in New Orleans. We'll hear a garden poem about being shut out from the garden. And we grow that garden library with an oldie but goodie about a favorite of many gardeners, alliums. I'll talk about a practical but essential garden gift. And then we'll wrap things up with a sweet story about the Impressionist painter whose friend made sure his coffin wasn't draped in black. But first, let's catch up on a few recent events. Today's curated articles include An Economic History of the English Garden by Roderick Floud. This was a review of his new book, In the Guardian. Here's what it said. Filled with fascinating and often surprising details, a rhododendron would set you back the equivalent of more than 1,000 pounds in the 1770s. This book reveals the economic context to our love of gardening and shows that the history of English gardens is in many senses the history of England. And then spending money on gardens has been one of the greatest and certainly most conspicuous forms of expenditure on luxury in England since the 17th century or earlier. I find this topic to be completely fascinating, and I've ordered my own copy of An Economic History of the English Garden by Roderick Floud. Then the Cornell Chronicle shared a great post about a bee exhibit that was creating a buzz at the Museum of the Earth. In general, this was an excellent post about bees and the many different species of bees that exist in the world. And I love what they said in this article. They said, people don't conserve what they don't know anything about. People hear a lot about honeybees, and they hear a little about bumblebees. But the other 96% of bees on Earth don't get much press coverage. One of these, Wallace's giant bee, the world's largest bee with a wingspan of 2.5 inches, imagine that, was thought to be extinct, but was rediscovered in Indonesia in 1981. These Wallace giant bees actually fetch thousands of dollars on eBay. That spurs collectors to catch them, further threatening the species' survival. Anyway, this was a fantastic post by the Cornell Chronicle. And if you're interested in reading it for yourself, just search for bee the next time you're in the Facebook group for the show. Finally, there was a great post by Jack Wallington called Stinging Nettles, a troublesome but useful weed. This is a great common sense post by Jack on stinging nettles, which can be a controversial topic because some gardeners are just completely opposed to them. And here's what Jack wrote. Although it's hard to control, like mint, it is so useful for homemade fertilizer and in nutritious teas and soups, and also for wildlife. Every garden deserves a little nettle. And I love that quote. Every garden deserves a little nettle. Made me think of Oprah. You get a nettle, and you get a nettle, and you get a nettle. Anyway, if you don't know much about stinging nettles, do a little reading on the topic. Go ahead and start with this article by Jack. Just search for nettle. This post will pop up. But in general, I find that the more you understand about stinging nettles, the less opposed you are to them. So check them out. Speaking of checking things out, if you'd like to check out these curated articles for yourself, you're in luck because I share all of it in the listener community in the free Facebook group, the Daily Gardener Community. So the next time you're in Facebook, just search for that, the Daily Gardener Community, right up in the search bar in Facebook. The group will pop up. You can request to join, and I will admit you into the group, and I'd love to meet you there. Here's today's brevities. Today is the birthday of the California oilman, vineyardist, and attorney Henry Welsh, who was born on this day in 1856. In 1912, the California raisin growers, including Welsh, decided to band together to sell their raisins as a group. Their plan was to create a $1 million corporation, and the concept drove Welsh to set up an innovative co-op that paired investors with raisin growers. Unlike other co-ops of the time, the raisin co-op was unique in that it bound the growers to deliver their entire crop for a guaranteed price, and they were locked in for 3 years. The co-op was known as the California Associated Raisin Company, and it quickly became known as the Sun-Made Raisin Growers Association. And the first president of that association was none other than Henry H. Welsh. And there's one little piece of trivia about Welsh that I discovered, and it had to do with his deep love for the Fresno area. He loved the climate and his vineyard so much that in 1941, Welsh bragged that he had not left the area for more than 40 years, not even to take a vacation. Now that's love. And today is the anniversary of the death of the Ohio-born botanist and willow expert Michael Shuck Bebb, who died on this day in 1895. In 1896, Walter Dean wrote a biography of Bebb's life in the Botanical Gazette. The biography included a fantastic photo of Bebb, who had sideburns that extended below his shoulders. I kid you not. Anyway, one of the most charming details was Bebb's description of his childhood garden. It was perfect. Here's what it said. The garden was laid out in old-fashioned geometric style. The borders well filled with rare shrubs and perennials, Holland bulbs, and I am happy to add native plants as well. If we add to this a well-stocked greenhouse, 20 by 150 feet in dimensions, we can readily understand how Michael early acquired a passion for the study of the plants around him. Later, after Michael's father retired from serving as the governor of Ohio, his dad purchased a large estate 100 miles northwest of Chicago, which he called Fountaindale. When Michael recalled the rolling prairie on the estate, he wrote, "Ah, that was lovely beyond description, and a perfect paradise for the out-of-doors botanist," which just underscores those early experiences in getting kids in the garden. And today is the anniversary of the tragic death of the Canadian botanist Charles Bud Robinson, who died on this day in 1913. After receiving his doctorate, Charles had spent 5 years working at the New York Botanical Garden. His time at the Botanic Garden gave him the experience necessary to become an economic botanist with the Bureau of Science in Manila. On this day in 1913, a little over 100 years ago, Charles left on an expedition to modern-day Ambon, an island in Indonesia. Setting out alone, Robinson spied a boy in a tree gathering coconuts, and he followed him back to his village. The boy was alarmed to see a strangely dressed and ominous-looking European alone on the island, And the villagers were worried that Charles was a headhunter, a danger that they'd heard about through rumors but couldn't verify. Overcome by fear that they were about to be beheaded, 5 members of the village, including the chief, killed Robinson and weighed his body down in the sea. Robinson's death was a shock to the island nation. He had managed to make some connections in the more populated areas where he was known as Dr. Flower. His death serves as a reminder to us of the dangers that were faced by plant explorers, who often had to overcome language barriers and cultural misunderstandings. On this day in 2012, tree number 5,000 was planted at the City Park in New Orleans following the destruction of Hurricane Katrina. Tree number 1, or the oldest tree in New Orleans City Park, is likely the famed McDonough oak, lovingly called the grandmother tree by locals, who estimate it to be approximately 800 years old. The tree is supported with wooden crutches that hold the impressive large old branches, and there's a plaque near the bottom of the tree which tells that the tree is named in honor of John McDonough, who donated the park's original 100 acres back in 1854. In 1850, McDonough left half of his fortune, $1.5 million, to the cities of Baltimore, New Orleans, and McDonoughville for the express purpose of helping children, which is why so many schools were named in his honor. The final withdrawal from the fund was made in 2002, so that was over 150 years of helping kids. During his lifetime, McDonough accumulated land after making his fortune in brickmaking and shipping. He wore the same old suit and reportedly looked like a bum in order to save as much money as he could so that he could acquire more land for the kids. One of the pieces of land that McDonough acquired included the Old Grove in New Orleans, which is the home of some of the oldest trees in the country, including the McDonough oak. The Old Grove has survived so long because it sits on high ground, and as a result, these ancient trees didn't experience the devastating flooding from Hurricane Katrina. In Unearthed Words, today is the birthday of 2 wonderful writers that drew inspiration from the garden, Frances Theodora Parsons and Christina Rossetti. Here's a poem from Rossetti called Shut Out, in which she describes looking at her garden through the bars of a closed gate. When she asks a guard to give her some clippings, he doesn't respond, but instead builds a wall around the garden. After she's shut out of her garden, she sits beside a bed of violets, but she can't love it because her heart is lost to her original garden. This poem is especially poignant for gardeners who have lost gardens due to a move, illness, or time. Sometimes the gardens we love the most are gardens that are no longer accessible to us, yet they remain in our hearts. Here's Shut Out by Christina Rossetti, who was born on this day in 1830. The door was shut. I looked between its iron bars and saw it lie, my garden, mine, beneath the sky, pied with all flowers, bedewed and green. From bough to bough the songbirds crossed, from flower to flower the moths and bees, with all its nests and stately trees. It had been mine, and it was lost. A shadowless spirit kept the gate, blank and unchanging like the grave. I, peering through, said, "Let me have some buds to cheer my outcast state." He answered not, or give me then but one small twig from shrub or tree, and bid my home remember me until I come to it again. The spirit was silent, but he took mortar and stone to build a wall. He left no loophole, great or small, through which my straining eyes might look. So now I sit here quite alone, blinded with tears, nor grieve for that, for naught is left worth looking at, since my delightful land is gone. A violet bed is budding near, wherein a lark has made her nest, and good they are, but not the best, and dear they are, but not so dear. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, Garlic, Onion, and Other Alliums by Ellen Spector Platt. Ellen Spector Platt started out as a psychologist before becoming a flower farmer at Meadowlark Farm and Herb Garden. Garlic, Onion, and Other Alliums was her 10th book. In one of her earlier books, Platt explained, "At first, the garden was simply a part of my personal stress management program, but then it became an exciting new part-time business. But the pull of farming finally seduced me to close my practice and to spend all of my working hours at the Meadowlark." It's fitting that Platt was inspired to write a handbook on the alliums, including garlic, onions, chives, leeks, and shallots, because they are a successful first venture for so many gardeners. Platt offers directions on growing and harvesting each plant, along with ideas for the garden, crafts, and cooking. And she includes step-by-step instructions for arrangements and wreaths and garlands, as well as recipes for soups, sides, and entrees. This book is an oldie but goodie, a personal favorite of mine, and it came out back in 2003. Best of all, you can get a used copy and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for under $5. And today's recommended holiday gift for gardeners is Ashman galvanized garden stakes or landscape staples. You can get a 500 pack of 6-inch sod and fence stakes. They're sturdy, rust-resistant, and they're fantastic for anchoring, landscaping, or holding down fabric or ground cover. Now, when I buy these, I get the pack of 500 for $41 because then each one costs around 8 cents. If you cut that by over half and get the 200 pack, it'll cost you $21, and each stake will be about 10 cents. And finally, the cheapest package is $10 for 50 stakes, and then each stake is 20 cents. So I like them because they're the really hardy, substantial staples. That's why they're my personal favorite. And I like to get the bigger box so that I can cut down the cost of each staple. And I definitely go through a box every single year. Now, you can get a box of these staples or stakes or whatever you want to call them and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes. Pick the price point that works for you. But if you get the pack of 500, it's a $41 gift. So there you go. And it could be one of those white elephant gifts that kind of baffles people because it'll feel super heavy and it'll kind of rattle around and they may not know what it is, but I guarantee you a gardener will totally appreciate this box of landscape staples. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. Today is the 96th anniversary of the death of the Impressionist painter Claude Monet, who died on this day in 1926 at the age of 86. Monet had insisted on a simple funeral, and as such, his coffin was draped with plain black cloth. His longtime friend, George Clemenceau, removed it, stating, no black for Monet. He replaced it with a beautiful flower-patterned fabric. Gardeners love Stephen Gwynn's 1934 book about Claude Monet and his garden. In 1883, Monet purchased a property, and he immediately set about creating a hidden water garden fashioned out of waste marshland. Monet made sure his lily pond was surrounded by trees and plants, incorporating poplars, willows, bamboo, and iris. And Monet's favorite plant and painting subject were no doubt his water lilies. Monet said, "I am following nature without being able to grasp her. I perhaps owe having become a painter to flowers." Monet painted his garden over the span of 40 years. In 1914, Monet began his most impressive work, a series of large panels that offered a 360-degree view of the pond. Monet worked on the panels all through the First World War. And it was Monet who wrote, "When you go out to paint, try to forget what objects you have before you, a tree, a house, a field, or whatever. Merely think, here is a little square of blue, here an oblong of pink, here a streak of yellow, and paint it just as it looks to you, the exact color and shape." And it was Monet who said, "My garden is my most beautiful masterpiece, and I must have flowers, always and always." Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up, and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow. In 1896, Walter Dean wrote a biography of Bebb's life in the Botanical Gazette of 1896. Blech. In 1896, Walter Dean wrote a biography of Bebb's life, and on this day in 2012, the 5,000th tree. That's hard to say. 5,000th. 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 Oh my gosh. 5,000th. 5,000th. Tree number 5,000. That's what I'm going to say. Here we go. And there's a plaque near the bottom of the tree trunk, which tells that the tree is named. Okay. When was Christina Rossetti born? Why don't we find that out? 1830. Okay, Google, what is 2019 minus 1830? From bough to bough, the songbirds crossed. From flower to flower, the moths and bees, with all its nests and stately trees, it had been mine. and it was lost.